Hi you there. Welcome and welcome back to my channel, Amin. So we've got this case today. It's all about revenge, or so they say. This guy went and killed more than 10 victims within 2 years, and if you ask him, he'd say it's a revenge for his brother. Well, his brother had passed away though. It's not like these 10 victims of his had killed his brother in any sense. Then what is it? And to protect the privacy of the victim and their families and to keep the story moving, I will use the most common English names when talking about them, the victims, since there are many victims. If this bothers anyone, I'm truly really sorry about that. Without further ado, let's dive right into it. It was February 2005 in Beijing. It was during the Spring Festival and it was past 11 o'clock in the evening. There weren't many people walking on the streets, and there was this black Jetta car with a small red light driving slowly as if it was looking for passengers. Back in those days, getting a taxi license wasn't easy, and owning and operating a private car was expensive. So a lot of people would take the chance at night when traffic police were taking a break to use their private cars as freelance taxis to make up the expenses of their car utility. These black taxis were pretty common at the time, and they still exist in some smaller cities in China today. A young woman with long hair and petite figure strolled out of an old residential area. The Jetta driver immediately parked his car, put on a big smile, and rushed over to that young woman, speaking in a full-on Beijing accent as he said, "Hi," and asked if she wanted a ride. "Wherever you headed, only 2 yuan. I'm giving you a sweet deal." The price was more than half off compared to regular taxis with meters. The young lady looked at the friendly local Beijing driver and, after a quick ponder, agreed to hop in for the ride. However, as the girl got closer to the car, she finally realized that something was off. Like, why was there someone in the back seat? She was about to talk to the driver because she didn't want to share a seat with a stranger, right? When the door in front of her suddenly swung open from the inside. Before she could even react, she felt this strong push on the back of her head, and she was like forcefully pushed into the back seat of the car, and her whole world was just went crazy. The young woman was stuck in the car, feeling like she was in a total nightmare. She was freaking out when someone covered her mouth and nose, making her pass out from fear and lack of air. Meanwhile, the Jetta driver was cruising through the night in Beijing, and the guy in the back seat couldn't help but blurt out, "Dude, did we actually pull it off? She had a few hundred yuan in her purse." The driver responded with a smirk. "Nah, we haven't done yet. Don't you think we should get rid of her? She saw us." That guy in the back seat was a bit confused about what he had hinted. All of a sudden, this intense shiver ran down his spine, like he totally realized what those words meant, and man, it freaked him out big time. They were supposed to do a robbery, not some crazy murder, right? That's their deal. The dude in the back seat felt his neck hair standing straight up, and this freezing chill went through his whole body. The excitement from before was totally gone, replaced by this overwhelming fear. He glanced up, thinking he should suggest letting her go, but when he caught a glimpse of those eyes staring at him in the rear-view mirror, dude, the way they mocked him and were all cold, he just couldn't say the word. Now he realized it's not an option. It seemed like it was either her died or both of them dying together. This guy was the nicest man in the world, was he? He got to put his hands around her neck and gradually tightened his grip. Despite his fingers were trembling, he was not gonna lose up. So he got to see how her face turned purple and the eyes in the rear view mirrors finally turned away. The guy in the backseat secretly sighed a relief. Out of the man's sight, the driver behind the wheel broke into a smile again, but it was no longer the kind and friendly smile. Instead, it was a chilling, unsettling grin. The hunt had begun. The driver parked the car in the neighborhood, grabbed a ratty burlap sack from the trunk, and together with the dude in the back seat, they put the girl inside it and carried her into their Carib. The driver was Song Jing Hua, and the other guy was his buddy, Yan Jinguang. Yan Jinguang seemed a little agitated when they both were home with the bag of deceased. Song Jing Hua saw through his awkward and told him to get some sleep, he'd handle the rest. Yan Jinguang, feeling like he had been given a get-out-of-jail-free card, quickly ran back to his own room, closed the door, and jumped into bed to catch some Z's. He was keeping his fingers crossed that when he woke up tomorrow, the cash and stuff would still be there, and the body would magically disappear in the morning light, just like a bad dream. Sending away Yan Jinguang, Song Jinghua could finally took his time to untie the bag and pulled out the body and took a closer look to the dead girl. Wow, he was amazed by the resemblance between this girl to his ex-girlfriend. He took out his set of knives and tools he prepared so long for her. Even though he couldn't find her, he'd use this girl as replacement to feed his hatred for now. Seeing the blade cut open the meat, he slowly dismembered the body and caressed his fingers through the dead cold skin. Imagined it was his ex that was lying on his hands and being cut open by him. He was so excited and thought it was the proper revenge he needed to remember his elder brother. As he cleaned up the aftermath, he still felt somewhat unsatisfied. Fortunately, Yan Jinguang needed money and he needed to kill, so they had a long time to work together and plan more crimes. Their first crime went surprisingly smoothly from start to finish. After pulling off the job, they didn't have to deal with any pesky police questioning like they had feared, and they didn't even run into any more cops on the streets like they had assumed. Slowly but surely, both of them started to chill out. Like I said, one of them was all about the money and the other was cool with taking lives. And you could say they worked together like a well-oiled machine. Within a year, these two dudes roamed the huge city of Beijing, pulling off one robbery after another. None of their victims managed to escape their clutches, and the youngest victim was only 16 years old. While doing their criminal thing, they figured it wouldn't be smart to bring their victims back home because, living areas are always buzzing with people and that could blow their cover. So the two of them decided to rent a place in some far-off village on the outskirts of Beijing. They stoked up this little house with all sorts of gears, axes, hammers, ropes, gloves, and sacks, all for their wicked purposes. Song Jinghua would dismember every single body all by himself. Yan Jinguang thought he was kinda nice, take care of the bodies and made them disappear, and he didn't need to help with the body management. And he never knew why Song Jinghua was so adamant about getting rid of all of them. I figured it was just to avoid police trouble, making it more difficult for them to figure out the victim's identity. But that didn't really matter. What was more important was that Song Jinghua would leave all the cool stuff and cash to him. Besides dealing with the bodies, he didn't take much. Yan Jinguang was like, he didn't give a damn about anything else, only cash, right? Anyone who could help him get rich was a cool person in his book. He didn't give a crap or bother about anything else. Once he had made enough money, he would just bounce, and with the world being so huge, he could go wherever the hell he wanted. So on the 27th of November 2006, Song Jing Hua, who's just cruising around Beijing, minding his own business, and then bam! He spots this chick on the side of the road, looked a bit lost, and seemed like she was trying to hail a taxi. Now this girl looked like she was about 17 or 18 years old, with this petite figure and hair flowing down to her waist. And she was wearing these super bright clothes that totally stood out on that gloomy winter night in Beijing. Plus, she had these two huge bags at her feet, with all sorts of random stuff tied up on top, like plastic basins and a hot water kettle. It was clear that she had come all the way from out of town to work in Beijing. And boy, did she look dusty and disheveled. As Song Jinghua drove a short distance, the night's reflections from the lights seemed to dazzle his eyes. And with a slightly distracted mind, he couldn't help but notice that this girl looked more and more like that woman. A surge of hatred welled up within him, and Song Jinghua slowly approached her in his car, putting on a practiced smile and asking, as he usually did, "Miss, do you need a ride? It's only 2 yuan, very cheap." Emily was kinda unsure and kept glancing up at the car's roof. She didn't see a taxi sign. She felt a bit hesitant and was cautious about getting into the car. Before coming to this big city, her family and friends back home had warned her about these unofficial taxis in Beijing, telling her to avoid them if possible as they weren't very legit. However, the driver of this car looked at her with a warm smile and seemed to get her consent. He kindly assured her that he knew she just arrived to work here and didn't have much money. As a local, he could help her find a cheap place to stay, which could help her save a lot of living expenses. Since she had a limited budget, even though she had a job that provided accommodations and meals, she arrived at Beijing late at night and needed a place to stay before going to this work registration the next day. After some thought and the fact that the driver didn't seem like a sketchy person to her, Emily hesitated but eventually decided to get into the car. When she nodded, the driver even got out of the car to help her load her luggage into the trunk, making Emily feel a bit embarrassed about her previous suspicions. Poor girl didn't understand why it was she that died in this apartment there in Beijing, just like she didn't understand why this driver hated her so much that he spit at her, cursed her, beat her, and then killed her. And she would never know that he'd take off her head and dismembered her, ditched her pieces to those remote woods. No one knew her whereabouts. It took a long time before her family back home realized that she had disappeared. The workplace where she was about to go didn't notify her family, so they were unaware of her absence until much later. Since Emily had never signed up to work, they just assumed that she didn't want to come, and as a result, no one bothered to contact the family. Just like these many other girls got killed by Song Jing Hua. So on this day, Song Jing Hua arrived at a cemetery on the outskirts of Beijing. He took out a cigarette, lit it, and placed it in front of the tombstone. Then he bowed and paid his respects. Finally, he sat down next to the tombstone, lit a cigarette for himself, gazing at the photograph on the tomb, murmuring to himself, "Now I've got many of those bitches to you. You'd get some companies, my brother. You deserve it all." As he was talking, Song Jinghua's face looked really sad and tears even filled up his eyes. He kept making promises and cursing at the tombstone that he would find that woman and he would take revenge for him. After taking a few more deep drags of his cigarettes, Song Jinghua turned around and left without even glancing back. His never-ending deadly game wouldn't stop until he found her. Why was he so obsessed about finding this woman? What exactly happened that twisted him to this point that he needed to kill to relax his vengeful urge? Song Jing Hua grew up with his elder brother, Song Jing, as their parents were always out, always not around, working to big cities to make ends meet. During Song Jing Hua's childhood, like any other kid, he needed to look up to someone as their role model, right? Since his parents were often absent, he naturally saw his older brother as someone to admire and imitate. It was only during their rebellious teenage years that their parents suddenly paid attention to them and started lecturing them intensely. The parents who had been distant during their childhood suddenly emerged, and their initial interactions were filled with scolding and admonishments. It was not a happy or healthy relationship to begin in such circumstances, especially for his elder brother Song Jing, who had been a free-spirited child. Faced with their parents' sudden intervention, he naturally rebelled. But when teenagers go against adults, besides feeling resentful, there wasn't much they could do. So Song Jing was sent to the military by their parents, and the parents was acting like it was for his education and improvement. In reality, I bet their parents just couldn't control him and hoped that the military could somehow discipline him and change him to the way they want him to be. They believed that strict military training could somehow magically transform him into a well-behaved child. Believe it or not, even today, many Chinese parents still have the same mindset as this brother's parents when it comes to raising their children. If they can handle their children, they send them to these many military-like institutions, thinking that strict training can shape these kids into whatever the persons they wanted them to become, and no one cared about the children's own desires. So you can imagine that this military experience could never change Song Jing. When he was left to the military, he was still the same bad kid as he used to be. Or you could say that he actually gotten worse. While in the military, he was just left to his own with no occasional letters or care from his families like his other comrades. So he was still this lonely kid whose parents ignored him. After his discharge, the military training had made him even more aggressive, and he became even more violent. Fighting and barreling, Song Jing became the local tough guy. At that time, Song Jing Hua had just graduated from junior high. His role model was like this, so it's easy to imagine what kind of person he would turn out to be. Although the Song brothers didn't do well academically and became troublemakers in their local area, their parents had actually made money and opened a nightclub and restaurant. They even took the brothers to Beijing and bought a flat for them there. Their parents kept their habits of coming and going at odd hours, but when the brothers were brought to Beijing, they no longer struggled financially like they did in their hometown. For some unknown reason, their parents started to giving them this pocket money monthly. So what would well-funded troublemakers do? It's safe to say that one of their favorite pastimes involved going to the coolest and trendiest nightclubs in Beijing at the time. Song Jing being a veteran with money in his pocket, and he had a younger brother who was just as strong, they both were quite generous. The two brothers quickly made a name for themselves in these entertainment spots, attracting a group of like-minded friends. Over time, they formed a small group that has some characteristics of an underground organization, and when they ran out of money, they turned to robbery. They would collect protection fees from vehicles like taxis and private cars. If someone refused to pay, they would damage the vehicles and physically harm the drivers. Their reputation grew, and they became quite notorious locally in Beijing. One day in 1996, as per usual, these two brothers, along with their gang of troublemakers, came across a driver who stubbornly refused to pay up. When Song Jing, the leader of the gang, saw this, he was like, if I can't get my hands on his money, how can I show off my reputation, right? So a bunch of thugs swarmed the driver and snatched his wallet. The driver, seeing he was about to get robbed, grabbed a tool and got ready to fight them. But since there were so many of them, he ended up getting fatally stabbed by Song Jing. The group of people, realizing that they might have actually killed someone, immediately scattered and ran away. Because there were so many people involved in this particular crime, and it took place in a rather busy area, the police quickly cracked the case. They arrested the gang of troublemakers, and later on, the court sentenced the ringleader Song Jing to death. Song Jing Hua, the brother, who also participated in this crime, got only 8 years in prison because he was still a minor when the crime took place. And he was released earlier in June 2002. The death of his brother made him feel like he had lost half of his soul. In the first year getting out of the prison, his parents trying to show that they cared, so they got him another flat in Beijing along with a car. The thing about fate is that it's so unpredictable. Take Song Jing, for example. Even after going to the military, he couldn't kick his bad habits. And his brother, Song Jing Hua, well, he served his time in prison, but never really felt like him or his brother did anything wrong. It's like his twisted mind somehow blamed his ex-girlfriend for his brother's death. How did it happen? Well, everything was going fine for a few days after the murder of the driver, right? Just this day, literally one day before his brother, Song Jing, got arrested by the cops, Song Jing Hua had this big fight with his girlfriend and broke up with this particular girlfriend. And guess what? During the trial, the same ex-girlfriend of his showed up as a witness and pointed finger at the two of them. So of course, Song Jing Hua was convinced that this woman had betrayed them, snitched to the police, and so caused their arrests, which ultimately led to his brother's death. Ever since then, he had this burning hatred for that damn woman, blaming her for his brother's demise. After Song Jing Hua got out of prison, he tried to find this ex-girlfriend, but it seemed like she disappeared into the crowd. Even if she was still in Beijing back in these days, without the internet, changing phone numbers and addresses could make it super hard to track people down. Song Jing Hua looked for her for so long, but couldn't get a hold of her. At the same time, his parents used his brother's death as a way to keep him from making bad decisions, right? Well, normal people would do that. But Song Jing Hua's way of thinking was anything but normal. Not only did he ignore his parents' advice, but he also thought they were getting in his way and even bullying them for his brother's death as well. In Song Jing Hua's mind, his brother was the most important person in the world. And his parents? Well, they didn't have as much influence on him, despite they bought him flat, they bought him car. To sum it up, driven by his twisted and extreme hatred, Song Jing Hua targeted girls who looked like his ex-girlfriend in various ways. If a stranger had long hair, a small figure, or even a little resemblance to his ex-girlfriend, she would become a victim of his evil intentions. But when I said this dude was anything but normal, he somehow knew he'd need help in his hunting games. And lucky for him, though a misfortune for these many victims, he ran into this dude, Yan Jinguang. Yan Jinguang was a year younger than Song Jing Hua, and he was coming to Beijing for jobs. This guy, like I said, didn't care anything but money. Whilst Song Jing Hua didn't care about money, he wanted to hunt. The two of them hit it off and embarked on a long journey down the criminal path. In their first joint crime, which I described in the first chapter, Song Jing Hua deliberately had Yan Jinguang committed the murder. Yan Jinguang, now stuck with the task of ending a life, wouldn't rat out Song Jing Hua and snitched on him later. As Song Jing Hua kept on offing more folks, he slowly started enjoying the rush of payback while committing the murders. He invented all the tortures he could imagine doing to his ex-girlfriend on his victims. The pleasure of enacting the revenge he had fantasized about made him addicted, and he became uncontrollable. Every time he killed, he couldn't help but relish the experience and long to feel the joy of killing them. Until he vaguely realized that he seemed to be losing control over this addiction. On this day, Song Jing Hua and Yan Jinguang teamed up to take out another girl. After dismembering the body once again, Yan Jinguang finally voiced his discontent with Song Jing Hua. Like I said, Yan Jinguang didn't have a compulsion to kill, he was in it for the money. These victims didn't have much cash on them, so even if they had offed 8 people, the earnings would probably be less than 1,000 Chinese yuan. It made more sense to find a regular job there in Beijing, especially since in 2005, the average yearly salary for workers in Beijing was around 33,000 yuan, which is over 2,700 yuan per month. So you see, working a regular job would bring in more money than this robbery and murder plan. So Song Jing Hua was racking his brain on how to steal and keep Yan Jinguang involved in the crimes, right? And then, out of nowhere, they heard a knock on their door. It's safe to say that both of them got a good scare from this unexpected knocking, especially with that severed head on the messy table, all covered with merely a plastic bag. They were completely clueless about what to do, and the knocking just kept getting more urgent. It caught them off guard big time, and they started feeling really alarmed. And then, out of the blue, they heard a voice outside the door. It sounded like this young girl from the apartment next door, and she seemed to be all by herself. Song Jing Hua let out a sign of relief and furrowed his brow as he made his way to open the door. When Yan Jinguang locked himself in the room, he didn't really feel like meeting up with neighbors due to his heated argument with Song Jing Hua over this killing matter, right? Upon opening the door, it was indeed this young girl, Lily, from the neighbor. She had a look of apology and explained her reason for being there. It turned out that her flat seemed to have a power outage, but when she stepped outside, the corridor was well lit. Alone in a dark room, she felt a bit frightened and couldn't figure out what was going on. That's when she remembered the neighbor next door, who was usually friendly and smiling. She wanted to ask him if she could borrow a candle until it was daylight, so she could call up someone to fix up the problems. Song Jing Hua opened the door and saw that there was indeed only this little young girl standing at the entrance, which put his mind at ease. The neighbor girl didn't look anything like Song Jing Hua's ex-girlfriend, so he never had an intention of hurting her. Although he was kind of hesitated to let her into his home because of this pet, of course. But he didn't want her to just stand outside and possibly attract attention from other neighbors as well, right? So he had to invite her inside. After some small talk, Song Jing Hua told her to hang on as he went to the utility room to grab a few candles for her. However, when he came back with the candles, he saw that the girl was looking totally shocked and grossed out, pointing at the messed up head on the table, asking what it was. Maybe because she was young and had a good impression of Song Jing Hua, she didn't immediately assume it was something really bad. After Song Jing Hua explained that it was just a monkey head, some wild game given by a friend, the girl, still a bit skeptical, took the candles and went back to her own flat without asking any more questions. It was only after she left and closed the door that Yan Jinguang came out from his own room. The two guys gave each other looks, both with these not so pleasant expressions on their faces. The very next day, before the neighbor girl called up for the electricity dude, there was a knock on the door, and Song Jing Hua and Yan Jinguang showed up with a big toolbox, saying they were there to lend out a hand to fix this circuit breaker and sorting out the electricity for her. And no one could reach out to this girl ever since after the help. On the afternoon of the 27th of September 2007, a vicious murder case occurred in a residential building in Beijing. The victim, Lily, was found dead in her rented apartment with a ruptured major artery in her neck, causing a pool of blood on the floor. So there was someone to report it to the police, right? Well, that person was actually Lily's friend. They had this plan to go shopping together on the 27th, but Lily had gone completely MIA since the evening of the 26th. Unable to reach her all day, the friend started getting more and more concerned about Lily's well-being. Since Lily was living alone, so her friend was thinking about this potential coal gas leak, as many water heaters used this type of water gas back then. This kind of canned gas usually has a strong smell like sulfur. So if there's a gas leak, it would be harmful to people inside, and the smell might even be noticeable to someone outside the door, so people could help, right? This friend of Lily's hurried to Lily's place to make sure everything was fine. Unfortunately, there was no response when she knocked on the door, and she couldn't smell anything strange either. So earlier, Lily had actually left a spare key with her friend just in case that she accidentally locked herself outside of a flat, right? And this friend actually brought it with her. The friend got to get inside the flat with this key, and boy, she stumbled upon this most shocking sin that she would never forget about. The cops checked everything out, and they found these footprints from two guys at the scene. But no fingerprints, no DNA stuff. Lily's phones and valuables were gone from her place, right? So it looked like someone had broken in for robbery. The doors and windows were all good, with bars on the windows and all. So it seemed like the suspect probably just waltzed in without causing a ruckus. Here's what they thought could have happened. 1. Maybe someone Lily knows was involved. 2. Maybe someone picked the lock and broke in. 3. Maybe someone pretended to be a plumber or something to get into the apartment before forcefully entering. Based on the forensic examinations, Lily's time of death was determined to be in the afternoon of the 26th. The cops used it as a starting point and went around the neighborhood to talk to people who might have seen something. But even after almost 2 weeks of digging, they didn't find anything solid. At the same time, they were looking into Lily's life and friends, and guess what? They made a big discovery. So at the crime scene, they found this brand new pack of Baisha cigarettes. The cops first thought it was Lily's, but turns out she didn't smoke, and there were no used butts in the flat either. So the detectives figured the suspect must have left the cigarettes there and started questioning the shops nearby. One shop owner noticed that the pack of cigarettes was something he had sold because he had this little trick to avoid people returning fake cigarettes and swapping them for real ones. He put special marks on his own cigarettes packagings. What's even cooler is that this shop owner was extra careful. After each sale, he would write down all the details in his notebook, like the serial number of the cigarettes and the date of the transaction, and the buyer's information. He used the names of regular customers and would write down basic descriptions of people he didn't recognize. By checking his records, The shop owner confirmed that the pack of cigarettes was bought by a regular customer who lived in the same building. Although he only knew this person as Song, he didn't have much information about him. But it was enough for the cops to quickly identify the suspect as Song Jing Hua, a jobless man who lived across Lily. The cops promptly caught Song Jing Hua. After comparing his footprints to the ones found in Lily's place, it was obvious that it was him. However, Song Jing Hua didn't confess anything about Lily and was not cooperative during questioning. They couldn't get anything from him until there was another man. He did something to this dude to finally make him confess. Song Jing Hua was put in a custody at a detention center in Beijing. Surprisingly, it was right there that a correction officer named An managed to break through Song Jing Hua's emotional defenses. It was already mid-November, and Beijing had gotten really cold. Song Jing Hua wasn't dressed properly for the weather, so Officer An hooked him up with some warm clothing and patiently gave him some guidance. He was saying, "The footprints and the cigarette found at the scene matched your profile. You can come up with a good explanation. So let's not keep this going." A real man owns up to his actions. At first, Song Jing Hua remained silent, but after being bullied by other inmates and scolded by Officer An, he privately expressed his gratitude. Officer An brushed off the things, offering him a cigarette, which Song Jing Hua accepted. After finishing the cigarette, Song Jing Hua said, "Officer An, I killed Lily." Following this admission, Song Jing Hua confessed to the murder of Lily, which he had committed alongside his accomplice Yan Jinguang. Using the information he provided, the police were able to apprehend Yan Jinguang. Not only did Song Jing Hua confess to this crime, but he also detailed his involvement in 8 other cases. Initially, these crimes involved simple murders, but over time, the level of violence and intensity escalated. For his latest victim, Lily, who also happened to be his neighbor, Song Jing Hua said that he had a good relationship. However, she visited his apartment after he had dismembered a victim and came face to face with a human head. At that moment, he told her that it was a monkey head, while she didn't raise any other questions. But Song Jing Hua started feeling more and more anxious, and because of his past experience with this ex-girlfriend reporting him, he became scared of being exposed. This fear led him to develop a desire to kill Lily. He, accompanied by Yan Jinguang, made up an excuse to enter Lily's apartment and ended up killing her. After the murder, Song Jing Hua instructed Yan Jinguang to leave while he stayed behind to clean up the scene. While he was alone with Lily's body, he even lit up a couple of cigarettes, but suddenly he felt tired. To make it look like he was the one who committed the crime, he brought an open pack of Baisa brand cigarettes from his own collection, leaving it behind as a deliberate clue for the police. Song Jing Hua admitted that he initially started killing people to get revenge for his brother and let out his built-up anger. However, as time went on, the crimes gave him a thrilling feeling that he became addictive and out of control. He confessed that he had thought about turning himself in multiple times, but he always ended up regretting it, and he finally decided to leave it to fate. That's why he left only this pack of cigarettes there in the flat, but didn't leave any other bioinformation of his there, like fingerprints or blood. No, nothing. He just decided to leave it to the police, to the fate, to decide whether he was gonna be caught. Due to his parents' neglect, Song Jing Hua was a mischievous troublemaker from a young age and wasn't very popular with teachers and classmates. Except for his close pals and family, he hardly got any love and affection from others. However, his time with Officer An in the detention center made him feel a sense of warmth and brotherhood. It was this bond that made him willingly admit his wrongdoings to Officer An. The prosecutor handling the case said that Song Jing Hua's personality was like a mix of two totally different things. Like in private talks, he might not seem like a super evil person, especially when he was talking about his grandparents and brother. He would even cry and stuff. But when you start digging into the messed up details of his murders and chopping people up, he shows this really savage and super brutal side. During the trial, both Song Jing Hua and Yan Jinguang offered no defense. The court determined that their action constituted intentional murder and robbery, characterized by extreme cruelty, severe circumstances, and grave consequences, posing a significant threat to society. As a result, both of them were sentenced to death, deprived of political rights for life, and had all their personal properties confiscated. On the 27th of May, 2011, Song Jing Hua and Yan Jinguang got executed. Well, before they were executed, Song Jing Hua was all like, "Thanks for the chill time in the detention center. Yo, I feel bad for the victims and I totally regret my impulsive moves." Song Jing Hua didn't have anything to say to his parents, and when he was talking to Officer An, he was like, "I don't feel anything for them." That's the end of the case, and I think I said that he offed 10 people. The 10th victim of his is himself. Like and subscribe to show your support so I can see you in my next video. Bye.